let's talk about Joe Rogan. Actually, did you ever listen to Joe Rogan in the past, like 10 years ago?
Like way before the Spotify, way before any of that. Like he used to be kind of a leftist.
I didn't even know him as a leftist back in the day. I just thought it was an interesting show and it was entertaining. And I'm a dude like the rest of them, right? I have the same foibles and the same interest and all that. I was like, oh, this is a 3-hour conversation. They crack wise, they tell jokes, they talk about interesting topics, and it was interesting to me. But man, COVID seemed to have cooked his brain to the extent where, it's just a Nazi show now. That's all it is, right?
Yeah, it's insane. And he also went way too far down the conspiracy rabbit hole himself. Like that Graham Hancock guy drives me so insane. And like, just
tell them who Graham Hancock is. Oh yeah, go ahead. Tell them who he is.
It's just okay. So Graham Hancock is this moron who just looks at stuff and ignores all of the scientific evidence that proves he's completely wrong, and then just lies. He'll straight be like, this is diorite, the hardest stone ever, and then it crumbles in his hand because it's fucking sandstone. Like, and there's so many times like this, and the guy just like is just a liar. He pretends to be an archaeologist. He has no training in the subject whatsoever. He's never been on an actual archaeological dig. He's never done any of that. He just looks at shit he doesn't understand and then makes up some conspiracy about some ancient civilization. And all of it, I am convinced, is based in racism. All of it. All the ancient alien crap, the ancient civilization crap. It's always these black people could not have made this. They must have had aliens.
Yeah.
It's like, no, because they never say it about like the Colosseum or anything that white people made. It's always somebody in South America or someplace in Africa or Peru. And it's all racism. I'm sorry. You cannot convince me that at the core of it all, it's all white people not wanting to believe that people of color did cool shit.
Yeah.
That's the whole thing. I swear to God.
Graham Hancock, but he does feed into that mindset where they're like, well, sure, he might sound crazy, but they said that about the people who claimed, or about when they talk about the Tuskegee experiments or whatever, were they crazy too? Right. And that they can just pivot right to that, like, going off that. The Graham Hancock thing, I remember a friend of mine was telling me that he was listening to Joe Rogan, which even back then I was like, uh-oh, what happened here? This could be something good. This could be something insane. It was insane. And he mentioned Graham Hancock was on the show. And he talked about this statue. I can't remember where it was, but the statue was like, 10,000 years old or whatever. And on the statue, they found these burn marks. And he said that the burn marks on the statue are consistent with a burn mark from a nuclear explosion. Like they dug this 10,000 statue from 100 feet underground. It's never been exposed to any modern nuclear explosion. So that's kind of fascinating. I said, really? He goes, well, it's consistent to either a nuclear explosion or a volcanic eruption. I was like, that's which one do you think it is? Just take a wild guess what I'm gonna say. And he started laughing up which one that's gonna be. But that's easy to do, right? And these folks, because they don't pay it. The cool, interesting, fantastical part where the aliens came down. We've traveled from 10 trillion miles away. Now stack these bricks in a triangle. That's what we're gonna do. Like that's that. Good.
So that's the other thing too, is they act like the Pyramid of Giza. The Pyramid of Giza is cool. I mean,
so cool.
But it is one of the most inefficiently built buildings in the history of mankind. Like when you think about how much material was used to create how much actual usable space, it is a huge waste of time. Like you would only do that for a god. That's the only people who would waste that much energy on something that inefficient, right?
Well, it's either that or a time machine, man. Like, come on. Like, it's what? I mean, come on. Like that. It's obviously some sort of time machine they have built there. I remember people talking about, actually, Neil deGrasse Tyson said this, who's not one of my favorite guys, but that's a different story. But Neil deGrasse Tyson, he was mentioning, someone's talking about the pyramids, and they say, isn't it interesting that you find pyramids in Egypt and you find them in Central America and you'll find them in Asia? You'll find all these ancient societies, they seem to have a love for pyramids. He goes, well, I mean, maybe, but the pyramid is like the most stable shape you could possibly build. That you could build 100 buildings. only the pyramids are left, right? They're the only ones left standing.
Right.
So yeah, but it's a lot cooler to think there is some sort of global interconnected alien network bonding this shit together. And if you're not interested in critical studies or critical thinking, that's you go for the dumb thing. And I just think these folks are part of the same relatively intelligent mammalian species that I'm part of, right? Like I'm not some Superman here or something like that. They should be smarter than this. I expect more from them, and I guess I made a mistake. I guess I have. They really let me down here.
Well, I
But
blame that on just the fact that our education system was designed to turn us into factory workers.
you don't say.
Like the whole system was designed by the Rockefellers to turn us into factory workers. It's not even like, I mean, that's why there's a bell that rings.
There's even a bell. I love it. There's even a bell. I always point that out. Yeah, that's so great. You move from station to station with a bell. And yeah, the education system. Now, listen, I'm a big fan of public education. Obviously, I'm not like some like conservative guys like, oh, we need to shut it down and let the parents teach their kids and they won't be able to because they're at work. It's obviously important. However, it just because the system came with 150 years ago or whatever doesn't mean we need to keep it right now. And the education system is built to create efficient workers. It's not necessarily built to make critical thinkers. It's like, hey, we need to make you a productive member of society. You need to take orders, sit still, and not rock the boat too much. And if we find out that you're talented, or if you're talented in that area, like school rewards people who can take orders, who can sit still, who can listen, you will succeed. They will reward you. They'll hand it to you. If you're anything different than that, they will shit on you from the time you're in first grade, and then you graduate. People have been shitting on you your whole life and not expecting anything from you, and you're probably not going anywhere because you're not useful to the capitalist system, which also kind of sucks.
Yeah, they don't want you asking too many questions.
No.
If you ask too many questions, then you're not a productive member of society because we just need you to do what you're told so that the capitalists can take their percentage.
Yeah. And if you show that you have like a high aptitude or something like that, you're going to be crafted into something like, okay, we need to make sure to get a hold of this person and definitely make sure that they're bought into this system so they can perpetuate it after we're gone. All right. So on that topic, when did you find yourself getting politically active or politically motivated?
Well, it's funny. I was very politically motivated when I was like 15 and 16, but I was like a borderline anarcho-capitalist, which is funny. Like I was a Ron Paul revolution kid.
Yeah.
Like not even joking. I stood on the side of the road in the little town I lived in with Ron Paul signs in 2012. And like the thing that got me was like I actually went to a libertarian gathering because I was always into libertarianism for the freedom aspect of it. I've always believed that the thing that produces the most freedom for humans is what we should go with.
Yeah.
And it had never occurred to me that like, well, if you don't have food, you don't have freedom. If you don't have a place to sleep, you don't have freedom. You know what I mean? Like the basic necessities of life. And I had always been a libertarian because at the time I thought the government just kind of screwed things up. I hadn't read very much at this point. And then I went to a libertarian gathering. And I don't know if you've ever been to a libertarian gathering, but don't go. It's just a bunch of racists. Like, and the thing when you look like me and you show up to a libertarian gathering with, I had the yellow shirt with the snake on it and the don't tread on me.
Don't tread on me.
Yeah. Everybody there just assumes you're a racist.
Yeah.
And so then all of a sudden you fucking find out real fact, oh, this is just like a Klan meeting. Yeah, I'm going home. You know what I mean? Like, so my mom was a lesbian. That's not what I wanted to do with libertarianism at all. And that kind of opened my eyes. And then I had this friend of mine who's a communist, and he made a point to me that kind of like broke my brain. We were talking about communism. I was telling him how evil it was and all that. And he asked me, he said, have you ever read anything from a communist, or have you just read things that capitalists have said about them?
Mm-hmm.
And he was right. I'd never read like Marx. I've never read the Communist Manifesto. I'd never read any of it. You know what I mean? And so then my brain kicked in and I had to read it. And so then I started with reading Capital, which do not start reading Capital. Like that book is a lesson in economics that will make your brain hurt. Like it just will. But I tried reading Capital and I got through it, but didn't really learn as much as it's more of a critique of capitalism. And by the end of it, you're kind of like, yeah, this doesn't make sense. And then I read the Communist Manifesto, and I started getting books I got Mao's Little Red Book. And then the more I read about it, it dawned on me why capitalists tell you that communism makes sense on paper. Because it really does.
Because it does.
It does. Like you start reading it and you're like, well, this makes a lot more sense than like some billionaire like watching us all starve and fight over scraps. I'm just like, the math here, maths.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, the I so much say libertarianism, but I want to start here first. Is that I always find it side splitting when I hear libertarians say that, well, communism looks good on paper, but it doesn't work in real life. Libertarianism doesn't even look good on paper. Like it doesn't. Like horrible. When you said you were a libertarian at 15, I think every man on earth was a libertarian at 15. I swear it must have been that way, because I remember being 14 years old, and I was thinking like, well, listen, of course the company that sells the most should get all the money and all the power. They can do whatever they want with that. Who am I to step in their way? Yeah. You don't think, I would say like libertarianism, libertarianism does make perfect sense if you stop and think about the problems in the world for 5 minutes and not 1 second longer. Because if you do it 1 second longer, it collapses like the house of cards that it absolutely is. Right. And it's really hilarious to hear them talk that, man, I tell you what, if the government just got out of our way, we could all prosper, and like they would be the next Jeff Bezos. Like, no, you would be a slave to one of the 4 trillionaires on planet Earth. That, like, just like the rest of us, that's what would happen. And they all think that Uncle Sam, because they're taxing their income at 21%, is just destroying the economics of the United States. It's like, folks, there's a reason there are no like libertarian countries where the government's like, nope, no taxes. We're just gonna just give it.
You see what happened in what was it, Venezuela?
Argentina.
Argentina. That's the, Argentina.
Yeah,
like,
and even go ahead.
And they're 70% poverty now?
It's just like it's a system that will like juice gains for 10 minutes and then fall on its face. It's why nobody does it. It's not because God is against them, or something like that. So also with the libertarians and the racism thing, I always joke like, you don't see a lot of Black libertarians, female libertarians, libertarians with physical disabilities. You don't see that. You don't see it for very good reasons, because if you grow up in any type of marginalized group, you realize precarity of your life right away. And there's someone I followed on TikTok, Sydney Says Things. She had a great quote about this. Is like, if every CEO was a Black woman, there would be no libertarians. They wouldn't happen. They'd be like, oh no, there's a problem here. The government needs to step in and do something, kind of like they do with whenever they can't make racial slurs or say the R word on social media apps. They complain that their free speech is violated to the government, as if that has anything to do with the First Amendment at all.